As the National Council of Elders, we pledge to be faithful to our history of movement building and activism. One of my elders was Dr. Vincent Harding, and he used to quote another elder who said, "America will be." And that we have the power to do that. And we're living in a time of we the people and experiencing that power. So it's with great joy and excitement that I get a chance to have conversation with Jody Dodd and to talk about restorative justice and the restorative justice movement in Philadelphia. And what's so cool about it is that each of us, we're doing restorative justice facilitation and organizing in our own locations. So there isn't one way of doing this. But I'm really thrilled that here in the Cradle of Liberty in Pennsylvania, and in Philadelphia in particular, that we're able to do it literally from porch to City Hall. And would like to talk about just this collaborative nature of what we're doing.
As much as Donna couldn't have imagined that she would ever be working with the DA's office, I never could have imagined I would be working in a DA's office if you'd asked me that question more than 6 years ago, because I'd spent most of my life working with peace and nonviolence organizations that had devoted much of my life to really deeply looking at what promotes peace and justice in the world, in our communities, with ourselves. And when Larry Cratchit became the DA, he was saying, well, let's do restorative justice, and asked me if I would be willing to help create that program. And so for the last 6 years, that work has involved talking to a lot of people in the community and finding out who they are and what they're doing and how they're doing it, and talking with people not just in Philadelphia, but really around the state and around the country about what they're doing with restorative justice. And in the course of all of those conversations and curiosity on my part about what people were doing and how they were doing it, I had the deep luxury of meeting Reverend Donna Jones and learning about restorative cities and the vision, and realize that's the vision that I share. I hold that vision as well, and see that would be a way that we could collaborate, and as we sometimes jokingly say, co-conspire with that vision of ending mass incarceration, with that ending of the vision of how do we reimagine a world where prison and police aren't necessary, or at the very least, they're not as necessary as they are being made to be now. How do we reimagine criminal justice to be something that is about promoting healing and justice through healing, and an opportunity for harms to be repaired, both for people that have been directly harmed, but also people who cause harm, and the community that's always impacted by that harm. So that is the work of restorative justice, that in its relationship with the DA's office, and I'm really honored to be a part of that.
Restorative justice is a process of conflict resolution where people come together in circle with community members, and they have a conversation about what's happened. We hear everybody's side, not just the two people who are involved, but their support systems, their families, people who are not typically included in the conversations when some kind of harm has happened, right? So this is something that started with, when we say indigenous, these are like Native Africans, these are Native Americans, these are First Peoples. And so they had practices where, but way before prisons, they knew how to resolve their conflicts. So, there's a lot of questions that people have about restorative justice. They think, having a conversation is not effective in actually being able to prevent things from happening, right? Restorative justice has such a lower rate of recidivism than incarceration does, and also costs a lot less for people to go through the program than typical incarcerations. What restorative justice is able to do and address people's families, people's communities, making sure that they know how to be reincorporated in society. So when people are incarcerated, it's a very isolating situation where it gives them the mindset of me against the world, right? And so when they come out, they don't feel like they're a part of the world. They still have the mindset of being isolated. And so that's why when people are returning citizens, they have such a hard time and end up right back into the system. So restorative justice means you can stay at home. You are part of the system, and we are all responsible for keeping you accountable, making sure that you're on the right track, and then you can also contribute back to what we're building here.
So my story, basically, I was a young man, 16, locked up in charge as an adult, sent on state road, set up to fail, to not be, anything in life. So Healing Futures got started because it was just this idea on how we can change the narrative of how things go in our city, as far as with young people going through the court system and things of that nature. You have all these folks saying all these bunch of things about you, but you don't have no voice. You feel like you're a young person in there, you have no voice to speak up for yourself, to tell your side of the story, or just to say how you feel. And also, like, every day you don't get to meet the person who did something to you. And plus, it's hard. It's challenging. And it's taking a step to hold young people accountable and make up for the things that they did wrong, to make things more right.
Just for context, a restorative justice diversion program happens after a young person has unfortunately maybe gone through arrest or been contacted by the system, and then the referral is made to us to be able to keep the young people in a community process that does not involve the system again until we tell them, hey, we did our job, we're done here.
It's rather than just telling everybody what we were gonna what we do in Circle, what we do in restorative justice, we thought we would construct a mini 2-person circle for people to see and for everybody to know. And so, just going through some of the elements of things that are here.
These are talking pieces. They're just symbolic of when you have it, the other person is in a state of active listening to you, and you can say, you hold it to speak, or you can hold it to make silence.
Yes. And so another element is kind of the centerpiece, or our base. And so all of this is kind of considered a centerpiece, but we always like to construct something in the center of the circle that brings people together based on shared values. It can also be based on people we love, people we've lost, important things in our lives, important objects that mean something to us or represent us, that we bring here in that collaborative aspect, right? That everybody is a part of the decision making and the values of the circle, right? So that we, pass the talking piece to each other. We ask really intentional questions, and not only ask them, but then we have to answer them ourselves as well, right? As people in the circle, we're all invited to listen and to share, and get an opportunity to be present. We always kind of invite the person harmed to share first in the circle. So we ask them if after we ground, we do some initial checking questions, and then we pass it over to the person harmed to talk about how this experience has impacted them. We give them the floor, and we really make sure that we prep with the young person to practice those things like active listening. So they also are able to, identify for themselves when shame might be coming up or when anger might be coming up, so that they can make sure that they're fully able to be present when the other person is talking. After that person shares, the person harmed, we then turn it over to the parent of the responsible young person to talk about their experience going through this process and anything they would like to share to the young person or to the person harmed. And then we turn it over to the young person, the responsible youth, to either share their letter, to give an impact statement. One of the really powerful circles that we did recently was with 2 young people who got into a fight at school that ended up being pretty severe for one of those young people. And they both ended up being in our program doing one-on-one work. The same sessions every week, they would do them on their own. And both worked really, really hard as 2 young Black men to come together and to talk about how this affected us. What were the things we were bringing to this fight, and how can we make a plan to do things better? And they were actually the first 2 young people ever in Healing Futures who were on either side of like a person harmed and a responsible young person to actually do a plan together. So then they ended up helping a food distribution organization in Germantown for what was supposed to be a month, and they're starting in September, and they are still helping out together to this day. And so I think those stories, those situations where these 2 young people have now found a passion for service and for helping people, that found an interest in business and nonprofit work, and have found, new ways that they want to grow while also reconnecting with themselves and each other. I think have been some of the most beautiful outcomes of the circles that we've done. And to see those 2 young people in a circle make that plan together with adults in the room, that we just got to be silent while these 2 young people made a plan about how to make things right, I think are are the things in circle that we would never be able to see in a courtroom, you know.
But you get to see a real vulnerability side of a young man owning up for what he did, apologizing for that, which is a hard thing to do for a 15, 14, 16-year-old. They're not used to just, I feel like that's way more harder coming up to write a perfect apology letter for a person. It feels good to see a different perspective on things as far as how we're so accustomed to the courts and the system. But just to see that things play out differently when two people come together with community and love and folks that care, things can play out totally different.